My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my revenge." We all know the lines. We love the legend. The betrayed general turned gladiator who challenged an empire for honor. It is the perfect Hollywood story. But what if I told you the real history is infinitely more brutal, more epic, and far more terrifying? Behind the ghost of Maximus hides a man of flesh and bone whose true legacy was erased by time. A strategist who didn't just fight for a family, but prevented the entire collapse of Western civilization. Forget the fiction. This is the story of the man who stood against the apocalypse. The year is 166 AD. To the outside world, the Roman Empire is an invincible superpower, stretching from the misty highlands of Britannia to the scorching sands of Mesopotamia. But this grandeur is a dangerous illusion. It is a giant with feet of clay, and the ground beneath it is starting to crack. A devastating plague brought back by legions returning from the east has annihilated millions. Entire cities have been transformed into silent cemeteries. The imperial treasuries dry, drained by distant wars and systemic corruption. Morale has hit rock bottom. And on the other side of the Danube, in the dark, freezing forests of Germania, something is stirring. For the first time in history, the tribes have united. The Marcomanni, the Quadi, and the Sarmatians have formed a terrifying confederation with one goal: to erase Rome from the map. They don't want to conquer, they want to annihilate. Their leader, Balamar, smells the blood in the water. He launches the greatest invasion the empire has seen in centuries, crossing the frozen Danube and burning everything in his path. Frontier lines that stood for generations are collapsing in days. For the first time, a barbarian army is marching on Italian soil. This is not a border skirmish, it's a struggle for the survival of the known world. On the throne sits Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher who spent his life writing about inner peace. Now he is forced to become a warlord. But his generals are traitors or fools, and his armies are decimated by disease. He needs a weapon. He needs his closest friend. His name is Marcus Nonius Macrinus, and he is the real Maximus. Marcus Nonius Macrinus. His name doesn't echo through modern pop culture. No blockbuster movies bear his title, yet the discovery of his tomb in 2008 revealed a life that eclipses any Hollywood script. Unlike the cinematic Maximus, he wasn't a Spanish farmer. He was an aristocrat from northern Italy, born into immense wealth and influence. But he wasn't forged in revenge, he was forged in duty. He climbed the Roman elite's ladder with surgical precision, from managing the empire's finances to dispensing justice as a praetor, and finally reaching the rank of consul, the highest honor in the Roman world. Crucially, he had been the governor of Pannonia, the most volatile province on the Danube frontier. He did not see the barbarians as a faceless, mindless horde. He had studied them. He understood their tribal loyalties, their shifting alliances, and their hidden weaknesses. His greatest weapon was never his sword or his skill in a gladiator's pit. It was his mind. Macrinus was a master of logistics, attrition, and psychological warfare. He knew that wars aren't won with heroic charges, but with secure supply lines and breaking an enemy's morale before the first shield ever clashes. Now his emperor has called him. In the command tent, the air is thick with fear. Other generals are terrified, begging Marcus Aurelius to retreat and abandon the provinces to save Italy. Macrinus remains silent, watching. He sees what they don't. Retreat is not an option, it's a massacre. When he finally speaks, his voice is calm but sharp as a blade. "We will not fight their way," he declared. "We will not give them the glorious pitched battle they crave. We will bleed them." He proposes a scorched earth strategy, ruthless, without honor, but the only chance for survival. The philosopher emperor nods. Macrinus is given supreme command. His mission? To do the impossible with an army of ghosts.
But Macrinus faces an immediate problem that even his strategic genius cannot easily solve. His first enemy is not across the river, it is within his own ranks. How do you lead men who already feel dead? How do you inspire an army of ghosts to face an avalanche? The army he inherits is a festering wound. 30,000 men, their strength sapped by the plague and their spirits devoured by fear. They are farmers and blacksmiths who feel abandoned by Rome, waiting for death from either the fever in their lungs or the barbarian axe in the forest. They believe they are a sacrifice. A lesser leader would have given a speech about glory or honor, but Macrinus knows those words are empty to men who have forgotten the taste of decent food. He knows a soldier's soul is fed with steel and bread. Before he can forge his men, he must clean house. His solution is an act of surgical cruelty. He summons the cohorts, standing on an elevated platform in icy silence. He doesn't shout. His voice freezes more than the Danube wind. He points to the officers. Cowardice, he tells them, is a plague faster than any disease. It spreads with a glance, and its only cure is eradication. The message is brutal. Bloodlines and political connections mean nothing on this frontier. Merit is the only currency. Survival is the only ideology. He makes the terror of incompetence greater than the terror of the enemy. But fear is only a tool. Once he has their attention, he gives them a reason to live. He becomes their chief doctor, their chief engineer, and their quartermaster. He dives into the grit of logistics that his aristocratic peers considered beneath them. He understands a fundamental truth: an army marches on its stomach. A man who sleeps on dry straw and eats hot bread begins to believe in tomorrow, and a man who believes in tomorrow can be convinced to fight for it. Now that he has tended to their bodies, Macrinus must conquer their minds. He needs to erase the image of the barbarian as an invincible monster and replace it with a flesh-and-blood enemy that can bleed and die. For that, he resorts to the oldest and most effective psychological warfare: hatred. He shows them the face of the war that awaits if they fail. He shows them the fate of their own families, their own farms, and their own cities. They no longer fight for an abstract concept called Rome. They fight so that woman is not their wife, and that child is not their son. The Danube frontier ceases to be a line on a map. It becomes the door to their own homes, and they, the army of ghosts, are now the bolt. The army is being reborn, forged not in hope, but in necessity, not in glory, but in shared fury. They are a sharp and brutal tool, and now they await the hand of their master. They don't have to wait long. A scout gallops into camp, his horse covered in foam. A vital outpost, the Castellum of Asali, which controls a strategic mountain pass, is about to be overrun by 10,000 Marcomanni. It is a beta test. The enemy wants to see if Rome's watchdog still has teeth. The report is a hammer blow: 500 Romans against 10,000, eagles against wolves. The legate in charge has sworn to resist to the last man, but without relief they will fall before the next moon. To Macrinus's counselors, it is a necessary sacrifice. It's a bait, they argue. They want us to move the bulk of our legions into the narrow valleys where our numbers mean nothing. We will lose the fort, but we will save Italy. The logic of fear is seductive. It was the obvious play: sacrifice the pawn to save the king. And precisely because of that, Macrinus knew it was a deadly trap, but not the trap his general saw. The real trap was in the minds of his own men.
If he let the Asali garrison die, every word he had spoken and every reform he had made would turn to ashes. Trust would wither, and the army would crumble from within. "We will not sacrifice anyone," he says, his finger tracing a route on the map that makes the other officers pale. His plan is calculated madness. He leaves the main army in camp to maintain the illusion of a full retreat. He takes an elite force of only 3,000 men, the toughest legionaries and the fastest auxiliary cavalry. Their mission? A forced march of 80 kilometers in 36 hours through impenetrable forests and frozen swamps. No stopping, total silence. Macrinus does not ride a horse in the rear, he walks on foot in the vanguard, sharing the same misery as his men. He has shown them he values their lives, and now they trust him with theirs without hesitation. As they reach the heights above the fort at dusk, they behold the nightmare. 10,000 barbarians, certain that no relief is coming, are launching a final assault. Battering rams pound the gates, scaling ladders claw the walls. For the 500 Romans inside, the end is certain. They fight only for a dignified death. But then the Roman trumpets sound. Panic is a poison, and Macrinus's cavalry is the needle injecting it straight into the enemy's jugular. They ignore the front line and fall upon the rear, cutting tent ropes and raining javelins on command groups. Their main weapon is fire. The warriors assaulting the fort stop and turn, their brains unable to process the nightmare unfolding behind them. Where did they come from? Is it the main army? In that precise moment of hesitation, the second act of Macrinus's deadly symphony begins. His legionaries advance in a perfect overlapping shield wall, a killing machine of wood and steel. It is Roman logic against Germanic fury, and logic is winning. Inside the fort, the sound of the horns is a signal of resurrection. The gates splinter open, not for the enemy to enter, but for the Roman garrison to charge out. It is the hammer and the anvil. The valley becomes a slaughterhouse. At dawn, silence returns to the valley of Asali, a thick, heavy silence broken only by the moans of the dying. Thousands of barbarian bodies cover the earth, their faces frozen in a grimace of surprise. Roman losses are minimal. Maximus enters the devastated fort, and Tullus, the exhausted commander, greets Macrinus with a simple nod. They need no words. They have achieved the impossible. But this victory, crushing as it is only the beginning. Macrinus has not avoided a war. He has declared one. The news of the massacre travels in whispers through the snow, reaching the ears of King Balamar. He does not feel fear. He feels the respect of one predator for another. He knows the name of the ghost that has risen on the frontier, and he summons the great horde, a nation in motion. More than 200,000 warriors, followed by their families and wagons. They come to replace Roman civilization with an order born of fire. Macrinus faces an impossible mathematical equation. He cannot face them in the open, and he cannot hide. So he does the unthinkable. He orders a generalized retreat. He turns the land itself into a weapon. He stretches the horde's supply lines, luring them deeper into a hostile, empty territory where the water is poisoned and the food is burned. He sacrifices the land to save the people. For weeks, the barbarians laugh at Roman cowardice, but the celebration turns to ash. Hunger and disease become Macrinus's invisible legions. Finally, he finds his natural cage, a valley near Aquileia. The horde, desperate and starving, charges one last time, but they are no longer an army, they are a mob. The Roman wall holds. From the hills, Macrinus's hidden reserves charge the flanks, turning the battle into the final, disciplined slaughter. Balamar, the king who united the tribes, dies at the foot of Macrinus's standard, pierced by a dozen spears. The threat is destroyed. Rome is safe. Hollywood gave us Maximus, a hero driven by revenge, but history gave us Macrinus, an aristocrat and a strategist who understood that to save civilization, you must sometimes unleash hell. He was not the hero cinema invented, he was the hero history desperately needed in its darkest hour.